Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 3 Sports Podcast. I am Ben Axelrod of WKYC. This is Craig Lyndall of Waiting for Next Year. We want to pick up this thing a little more frequently now that we are in Brown season, but the Browns are good again. What are we going to do? This was a much easier podcast when they were going 0-16.
Their winning streak is up to 5 in the preseason.
Woo! We'll talk about the game last night. The preseason game between the Browns and the New York Giants, and we'll get to that. I want to start with Hard Knocks, though.
Okay.
Have you watched it?
Yes.
What were your impressions?
So, first of all, I love Hard Knocks. It's
Me too.
Really, really well done, and I loved the first episode. I didn't love necessarily the first 6 minutes. I thought the LeBron stuff was kind of shoehorned in there, but
yeah,
that's
to be expected.
Stuff, that's not for us
right.
who live here. That's for people who don't live here to pull them in and show them the wider context, a context we don't need to be reminded of yet again. But no, I thought it was really good. They got that stuff out of the way in the first 5 or 6 minutes, and then we're diving into characters, and I loved the characters that they put on a pedestal this first episode.
Yeah, I agree. I've watched Hard Knocks since 2007. I think it was the Chiefs were on it, and I think that was really kind of the launching point for them.
Is that the one that exposed the coach? He's Herm Edwards.
Yes.
And he never recovered from Hard Knocks.
No, he's been an ESPN caricature pretty much ever since.
He was a goofball. They had video of him like making tough decisions and thinking hard, and like it looked like it hurt to think.
And it was a very boring roster. I think actually, I think Dwayne Bowe, he had a holdout during that, and that was one of the big storylines.
Shocking.
Imagine that. And then the next year, I think, was the Cowboys, and they had T.O., and the year after that was, I think, the famous Jets season with the G.D. Snack and all of that. But Hard Knocks has been a staple of my Augusts now for the better part of 10 years. There have been some forgettable seasons in there, but I've watched the last 5 or 6 religiously. And it's cool to have the Browns on it. It's really, really cool to have the Browns on it.
All these people who are talking about the cloak and dagger downside of having the Browns on Hard Knocks can just shut it. This is awesome.
It's really cool. It's like believing in the Madden curse, right? And the LeBron stuff, it felt a little forced, but there was also, I thought, the way that they spliced that up with Hugh and the lake jump. That is providing some context.
It made sense.
To what the Browns are about to go through, where this is there for the taking for them, and they're on the upswing and all of that. So that's fine. I am not the thing though that people need to remember, and I don't know if our fan base is the best fan base for this. And somebody made this point on Twitter yesterday, and off the top of my head, it was Nam. Jeff made it.
Yes.
Because the Dolphins were on it a few years ago, which actually was, I thought, one of the more forgettable seasons, other than
it was.
Ocho Cinco got cut in the middle of it, I think. But that might have been the last season I didn't watch. But
their coach was really boring that year.
Was it Sperano? Was it?
No, I thought it was the other guy.
Philbin?
I thought
Joe
it was
Philbin?
I thought it was Joe Philbin.
It might have been. Yeah, it was anyway. It was Joe Philbin. It was not a memorable season in the least bit, other than Ocho Cinco getting cut, and pretty much I think that ended his career. But Nam put it best: Hard Knocks is a show. It's not a documentary,
right?
And I'm not going to do this thing, and I don't want to be the guy who's always defending Hugh Jackson, because I know that it comes off like that. We cannot do this thing where we take 5 minutes out of context from some meeting that probably lasted an hour, when they admittedly have 400 hours of footage to go through, and take that as anything more than it is, right? It's a peek inside the Cleveland Browns. It is not, they're purporting it as a storyline. They're going to probably make it a storyline. It was kind of a theme with Jarvis Landry's speech and all that, but we cannot do this thing where what we see on Hard Knocks is an indictment of Hugh Jackson or Baker Mayfield or any other player for that matter. This is a look inside training camp. It is not training camp.
Yes, exactly that. And So when Hugh Jackson talks to Baker Mayfield about getting in early, that is like one thing, a moment, a little snippet.
Correct.
It doesn't define his relationship with Baker Mayfield. And that one awkward thing where Hugh is setting his boundaries as, well, I'm the head coach and I sat in this seat and it came off a little awkward. That's one snippet. We don't, otherwise, he's turned over the offense to Todd Haley. We have so much evidence that everything is fine, at least for now, that to look at body language and go Zapruder film on that coaches meeting is crazy. It's fun, but it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's one of those, again, like the scene completely lacked context. I think the player they were talking about was Duke Johnson, who does have a history of injuries, who does have a history of pulling up with hamstrings, and it was the two guys, Todd Haley and the running backs coach, Freddie Kitchens, I think is his name. Those are the two newcomers who maybe don't know that about Duke Johnson. Like, there are 100 ways to spin it. And just because a lot of Browns fans obviously have preconceived notions about Hugh Jackson and all of that, I just, Hugh Jackson's screen time was mostly about the death of his mother and brother. Right. And so to cherry pick the 5% that wasn't about that, I don't know how that's your big takeaway from Hard Knocks. I loved that episode though. And maybe I'm biased, but that was like one of the best debuts I had seen.
Yes, and the idea that they shouldn't have shown Hugh Jackson grieving, Hugh was okay with that.
Right.
He gave that green light to a certain extent. You have to think, and I think the producer of the show, the director of the show said as much. Mm-hmm. They can show whatever they want, but they're not trying to torture anybody. It's a partnership here, and Hugh Jackson. It was good and humanizing for him, because I think a lot of people were saying, well, I can't believe you put football over family. Right. And that was the take on Twitter before the show debuted. I think he's just trying to cope.
Yeah.
He's just trying to figure,
he's a football lifer.
Nobody knows the best way through this stuff.
Right.
And so this idea that he put something over something, it might be ludicrous. Maybe it's true. I don't know, but some things you don't need to have an opinion on.
Right, exactly, and that will probably launch us into the preseason and all of that. But it is funny, the Browns fan base, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, has very much become a two-party system. And I don't know if that's an indication of our country or a reflection of our country or anything like that. But you were either for Sashi and against Hugh, or you're against Sashi and for Hugh. There is very little, and again, I'm as guilty of it as anybody, because my inclination is to defend Hugh Jackson because I thought he got dealt a bad hand in terms of talent the last 2 years. But it's very much a two-party system, and I think a lot of that showed in the reaction to Hard Knocks.
Well, and the interesting thing is that anybody who is pro Sashi, like the evidence is done.
Right.
There's nothing left to help prove your point. Sashi Brown can't come in and help the Browns become better today. Mm-hmm. You're left grasping on those minuscule breadcrumbs that are left behind from his era.
Yes.
And it just doesn't, it's not, he didn't get a chance to complete his project. I'll give him that. I'm not pro Sashi, but he didn't get a chance to complete his project. I think his project was flawed in many, many ways.
Right, and maybe deservedly so, he didn't get to finish the project.
But he didn't get a chance to select his quarterback at the top of this year's draft. He didn't get a chance to go after and trade for Jarvis Landry. Who knows what he does? Mm-hmm. Who knows what he does? So the people who hate him will define him by Kenny Britt, and the people who love him will look at Larry Ogunjobi.
I think there's more to define him by than Kenny Britt.
Well, right.
The Carson Wentz trade, for one.
But you see what I mean.
Right. No, I
you'll
agree.
You'll pick your evidence. You'll stand on your side of the fence.
Sure.
And then you'll lob it across the other side.
Well, I think you could say, so let's spin this forward to the preseason game where, I mean, it's hard to get overly excited about a preseason game.
They checked the box.
They did everything you wanted them to. And you know what? It's funny because they went 4-0 last year.
Yep.
They could have lost yesterday, and the optimism, for me at least, would still be there.
Yes.
And the way they went 4-0 last year, if you remember those games, was Brock Osweiler and Cody Kessler couldn't move the ball down the field. And they basically, Deshaun Kaiser would get into a shootout with the Giants' fourth stringers. I mean, he was throwing to guys I can't even remember their name. He was playing against guys who will never know their names. It was 4-0 last year was a footnote.
So let's take it to Buffalo before we finish the Browns thing.
Yeah.
Because last night, the Bills were playing, I don't even know who they were playing. Carolina. They were playing Carolina. Yep. And all of a sudden, Twitter lit up with the highlight of Josh Allen falling all over his feet and Brandon Whedon frisbee tossing the ball into danger.
Right.
And then in the fourth quarter, with 1:13 left, he fired a bullet into the corner of the end zone. And Bills fans were going, see, you need to tell the whole story. And I'm not mocking Bills fans. I feel sorry for them because I've been there where all right, it took till the fourth quarter, but Brandon Whedon's finally coming around.
Right.
I've got more evidence than they do, more bad evidence
right.
of me being an apologist or trying to find something to feel positive about. And I just don't feel like you have to do that with the Browns from their first preseason game. Tyrod Taylor went 5 for 5 or whatever it was, and Baker Mayfield looked fine. The best thing is the Browns just held serve. I
agree. And I think preseason context is different for every single team, right?
Yes.
In the sense that, the Colts, I don't think won a preseason game when Peyton Manning was their quarterback. They went 0-4 multiple years in the preseason.
Because they were paying $30 million a year for Peyton Manning, and they had the
right.
dregs of the league behind him.
Right. For the Browns scripted very clearly. The Browns game planned a little yesterday for the first team and really for Baker Mayfield and what he did. The Giants were very vanilla. They were vanilla last year, especially with Odell Beckham Jr. not playing. I mean, that was not the New York Football Giants. That was just, a shell of themselves. Davis Webb played the majority of the game. For the Browns,
if a UFC fight is a fight, that was sparring.
Right. For the Browns, though, they took it a little more seriously, especially when it came to probably, the first half and maybe the first half of the third quarter. There is really, for no team, regardless of if you're the Browns or you're the Patriots or you're the Bills or the Packers, I mean, you should probably turn off a preseason game in the fourth quarter.
Oh, yeah.
There's no value to be gained unless you're one of those, and I use this term lovingly because I fall in, unless you're one of those nerds who really needs to know what the 53-man roster is going to look like from 1 through 53.
You want to know the guy who's going to end up on your practice squad.
Right. If you're really into practice squads, then I guess you can watch the fourth quarter, but there is no context for any team in the fourth quarter of a preseason game. It really, I mean, especially with the way rosters have expanded, it could not be more meaningless.
Especially in the first game. And,
right.
And that'll probably drive us to our next point. That's why I'm not panicking over Nick Chubb.
No.
That's why I'm not panicking over the running game.
It's tough to panic. Right. Nick Chubb, who knows what his role will be.
So I'm not over the moon about Tyrod Taylor. I'm not panicking about Nick Chubb either. So I'm fine.
Right.
They held serve.
Where are you on Baker Mayfield?
I'm fine. He's already shown me that he's capable of being a backup.
Yeah.
Which is no small feat, honestly. And again, it was totally vanilla. The game plan was set up for him, but he looks natural in the pocket.
Yeah.
He
looks like an NFL quarterback.
He makes throws on the run, and he showed accuracy. And maybe he's not going to – the rookie quarterback is not going to know to release the ball early. Mm-hmm. Those are the kinds of things that you pick up over time. And your backup quarterback might never pick that up.
Right.
But so far, so good. That's all.
Right. And he looked like an NFL quarterback, which, to be honest, and I wasn't a Baker Mayfield guy before the draft. I don't think you were either.
Not especially.
That was one of the concerns with him, is he's not Sam Darnold size. He's not that big guy. He looked like he belonged out there, so that checks off a box. And because he played well, and again, context is king in all of this, but because he played well, it does allow you to project forward into, well, what could this look like if Baker Mayfield it's not that disaster. It's not last season. It's not, I mean, even with Deshaun Kaiser lighting up the fourth team, there was very little optimism at this point last season. But this does allow you to continue to project forward. And to that end, maybe Sashi Brown's plan works out in the long run. But there, again, it's no longer Sashi Brown's plan. And there was no evidence that this roster would look like what it looks like now. No. Had Sashi Brown been the one, they wouldn't have gone out and acquired Jarvis Landry. They wouldn't have gone out and probably acquired Tyrod Taylor. It is what it is, but it does, it makes Sashi's plan look better. I'll say that. But again, this is where we need to bridge the gap between this two-party system, because at the end of the day, we're all just Browns fans.
Yes. And I would like to stop having the argument about Carson Wentz and that trade. It's not a good trade.
No.
The idea that Carson Wentz never could have become Carson Wentz with the Browns is dumb.
Right. The idea that it acquired all these starters for the Browns.
Yes. That's
as if that's any standard of measurement.
No. And if you draft Carson Wentz, the rest of your plan changes. You pick up those starters in free agency and everything else. So the team that went 0-16 last year would have looked different at quarterback and everywhere else. Every domino knocks down a couple other dominoes. That's the idea. So we do need to kind of close the book on it and move on to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But
you know what though? I agree. But it was also so egregious in real time.
Yes.
And it was so reminiscent of trading away Julio Jones.
Yes.
And so I understand, because it's the most frustrating, that's the most frustrating thing in the world to me, is that the Browns have been as bad as they've been for so long and still until now lacked top end talent.
Yes.
In a league that's designed to put the good draft picks on the bad teams. That's what made 2016 so egregious, you could see it happening in real time.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe it looks different if Myles Garrett's healthy all year, but still, to only have one player, the idea is that the Browns were bad enough they should have had 4 or 5.
Right.
And as much as I like Jabril Peppers and David Njoku, and I do like those guys, it takes a whole team building thing for those guys to become the best that they can be. And I felt like we were never getting there in terms of building that whole team aesthetic.
I agree completely.
And last but not least, Sashi Brown never would have been hired for that position by any other team in the league. Hugh Jackson would have been hired for his job by at least 5 or 6 teams.
Oh, he was the hot candidate in 2016.
That's the argument ender in my book.
Yeah.
Sashi Brown could have worked out better, but ultimately it was an experiment that the NFL it wouldn't have happened in any other NFL city.
Right.
It was unique in a bad way.
It was the most ambitious rebuild and ambitious teardown in NFL history, and you could see that was the thing I was always saying. 1-15 in 2016, that was fine. It wasn't fun, but that was to be expected. Nobody thought the Browns were going to be good. I saw it as early as 2016 was, okay, well, what happens if they don't win X amount of games the following year? Because these wins this win-loss record is going to add up. I didn't expect 0-16, but that's what happened.
We all agreed that Ray Farmer's final team was old and bad, and that was unacceptable. But being that young and that bad was also unacceptable.
Correct.
Almost and almost worse.
Right. Where I know you a little bit, so I know how you felt about it. What did you think of Corey Coleman?
So I'm not broken up over the loss of Corey Coleman. I think we would know already if he was going to become Antonio Brown.
Yep.
So I'm not all broken up about it. I think that it was a stunning waste of asset. We'll obviously find out a lot more this week on Hard Knocks what the context of that deal actually was. But from the outside looking in, I wrote on Waiting for Next Year that it felt like we lost the hand of poker. We folded a pair of jacks when we probably could have stayed in long enough to see the river. We got deked by a better card player.
I wrote about this on WKYC.com. Corey Coleman's kind of the face of the Sashi Brown regime. Like, he will always be, because he was such an analytics-driven pick, because of what he lacked is the big problem with solely relying on analytics or heavily relying on analytics, his character issues, all of that. It didn't show up, in how the Browns graded him clearly. And because you traded back from 2 to 15 to get him, like, he will always, to me, represent what was wrong about the Sashi Brown era. And that's why he's such a polarizing player on Brown's Twitter, is the Sashi lovers, are like, how can you get rid of this young talent? This is the same thing every Browns regime does. Why would you only give up on him after 2 years? And the Sashi haters are saying, thank God we cut our losses, blah, blah, blah. I think it's one of those things, though. You have to accept it, and because of Hard Knocks, we might actually learn what really happened, although I'll be interested to see how they handle it. It's one of those things I think everybody has to accept. We don't have all the information. Clearly, yes. There was something the Browns were not comfortable with him still being in that locker room, whether it was because of Antonio Callaway, whether it was because they think Josh Gordon is coming back, whether it's because they're seeing old habits.
But don't talk to me about their cap savings. And
could not care less.
No, I know you don't. I'm just like the world at large that we're talking to.
Right.
Don't talk to me about, well, it's better than cutting him because at least they save the money on the salary, the 2 years and the $3.5 million. Like, this is something else.
Right.
If he plays in that first preseason game and goes, catches a couple Baker Mayfield passes and goes for 110 yards.
Yeah.
Maybe we could get a little bit better than a 27th round pick.
Maybe.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe. But, I don't. Rashard Higgins had a nice game yesterday. I don't know what you'd get for him now because of a nice game. I'm not really I didn't think, to me, after like a 4th or 5th round pick, it's all the same.
But you also know that nobody is more self-confident than an NFL coach. And they're like, former first-round talent?
Oh, right.
I'll mold that.
Oh, they're making that point. I saw that point yesterday. That's why Cam Irving is still getting chances.
Yeah.
That's why he's going to – if you get picked in the first round, unless you're a complete, flame out like Justin Gilbert, you're pretty much guaranteed a 4 or 5 year NFL career.
Yeah, or ineligible like whatever, the receiver. Is it Jacksonville?
Oh, yeah, Justin Blackman.
Justin Blackman.
Yeah. I mean, it takes extenuating circumstances to be a first-round pick and have your career over in less than 4 years.
For sure.
And yet the Browns have somehow had like 3 of those guys, 2 of them in the same draft.
The ego of an NFL coach is amazing. They all think they can mold that clay into like a beautiful statue. And
into a franchise.
Yeah.
What was your opinion of, well, I guess we can kind of mold these together, although it's not necessarily fair to either of them. While we're on Corey Coleman, the state of the Browns receiving core is very strange in the sense that you have Jarvis Landry, who, for all intents and purposes, is the best receiver they've had since Josh Gordon in 2013. They have Josh Gordon, although he's not on the team right now. They have Antonio Callaway, who looks like he has a ton of promise, but can't seem to stay out of trouble. Where are you at, I guess, more so with Josh Gordon and Antonio Callaway?
So, in a vacuum, Antonio Callaway's issue is not a big deal, but it's not a vacuum. And
yeah,
I mean, what happened to Antonio Callaway at 3:00 in the morning? Would that be a big deal if that happened to you in your life, in your world?
Yeah, it would be.
It'd be a giant ordeal in my world.
Yeah.
But here we are, because he's an NFL player, because he can play football, because the Browns used a 4th round pick on him. We're finding all these ways to, it's a misdemeanor.
Right.
I wake up every day with a sole purpose in my life to not get arrested and not get misdemeanors and not get whatever. That's the idea. And none of us are immune. Whatever. Things happen. But things seem to happen to this guy quite a bit.
Well, that's the context of it. That, is in a vacuum, it's not a big deal. But this is also a guy who people thought was a borderline first-round talent, who you got with the 105th pick because there were teams who crossed him off their board because he had so many issues. He didn't play last season. He was suspended because of credit card fraud. Yeah. He was investigated for sexual assault. He tested positive at the combine, which is like the dumbest drug test you could possibly fail because you know when it's coming. This is a guy who arrived at the Browns with 2 strikes. He's in the drug policy system. He's in.
Do we know that for sure?
Yes, he is
because
of the failed test at the combine.
Diluted sample.
That puts you in the. that puts you in the. And another thing about diluted samples, it's not that you accidentally drank too much water. If you have a diluted sample, I think you were trying to mess with your sample.
Just trying to be hydrated for the combine, Ben.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Trying to keep that muscle on. I get it. So he arrives with 2 strikes. So what's this? Is this a check swing? Is this that's the thing, right? Is how, and I'm not saying cut him, but it's, this is another guy who you're relying on who isn't reliable.
This is not something that makes him cuttable. I mean, you
already took the risk.
You already took the risk, and the idea is that we've seen LeGarrette Blount and Le'Veon Bell play for Pittsburgh after getting themselves pulled over on the way to the team plane or something like that. I mean, let's just calm down.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't punch anybody out. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't avoid the scene of a crash. There are some things that he probably should have told the Browns about.
But you know what? That's the one place I will defend him on is. Did you watch the TMZ video of the traffic stop? The cop really made it out to not be a big deal. It was like the cop seemed to kind of be fanboying a little bit.
Sure.
And he kind of made it seem like, well, it's really just the driving with a suspended license that's a problem. I kind of have to cite you for the weed, but it's okay. It's like the cop. I mean, that's not what he was saying verbatim, obviously, but the cop really was like playing super nice with him. And Antonio Callaway was like, "Is this going to mess me up?" And he's like, "Well, it shouldn't." And it was, the cop kind of. I understood why Antonio Callaway might have shown up. Given all that he's been through otherwise, might have shown up at practice the next day where he practiced with the Browns first team thinking everything was hunky-dory.
Yeah, well, I guess. And I also need to get myself back into the frame of mind where I'm in my 20s.
Right.
And I have, maybe I could just get away with it.
Right.
Like the self-confidence and experience that I have as a 39-year-old man is far different than... Like, I don't know.
Well, who knows what he's gotten away with in the past?
Yeah.
Who knows what other Browns players have gotten away with in the past? Or NFL players around the league. It's not specific to the Browns. Although for some reason this does seem to be specific to the Browns at times.
I always wonder that, by the way. I do wonder, like, are there these little issues happening in Carolina and Arizona and we're just not plugged in enough with those teams to care?
I think so.
There's so many players on every single team, especially right now, that there could be the 75th player on the Jets who got pulled over at 4 o'clock in the morning with a DUI, and it wouldn't hit my radar.
I think there's stuff. Like when you mentioned Le'Veon Bell, I completely forgot about Le'Veon Bell.
With LeGarrette Blount.
I mean, think of all the guys the Patriots ship out or take second chances on. There's stuff.
There was the dude with synthetic weed who went to the police station.
Yeah,
they ended up shipping him to Arizona.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Chandler Jones.
But I barely heard about that.
Right,
I was barely paying attention.
Right, but it's probably if you were in New England, it would be leading sports talk radio. And I
would know every detail. I'd be able to recite it back to you like I can with some.
Right.
Some of the Browns players.
The problem, I guess this is my issue with the Antonio Callaway thing, and it's why I probably wouldn't have drafted him in the first place. It has nothing to do, I don't go to the Cleveland Browns for my morals. I don't, I accepted a long time, there are going to be guys on the team,
There's certain things I can't abide.
Right.
But getting pulled over at 3 o'clock in the morning, not being arrested for DUI, not fighting a cop.
Right.
Like, I can deal with it.
The issue is, and just from a pure selfish football standpoint, is if I told you next week Antonio Callaway failed a drug test and is going to be suspended for 8 games, you wouldn't be surprised.
Nope.
And that's, Josh Gordon, when it came out, 3 weeks ago now, that he wasn't going to be at camp.
Not
I was
shocked.
like, here we go again.
Yep.
And it's maybe he's not off the wagon, maybe whatever, maybe that's, going back to Hard Knocks, they treated that with kid gloves. You really think that the Browns offensive staff meeting was just, hey guys, Josh isn't going to be here, but trust us, he'll be here later. You think that's really how that went down?
That felt like a put on.
A little bit.
Yeah. Like a setup scene from The Apprentice or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They treated that with kid gloves.
Let's do the boardroom again, okay?
Yeah.
Take two.
But that's, the Josh Gordon thing I think is getting kind of frustrating.
Yes.
And again, treating it as sensitively as we can and all that, because on Twitter you have to do that. And
I'm tired of I'm rooting for Josh the person.
Yeah.
Enough. We get it. That's another thing I wrote on Waiting for Next Year. Like, I'm done with that.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not hoping for him to fall off the wagon and ruin his life personally and professionally. Do I have to say that every time before we talk about Josh Gordon? Let's stop.
Right.
Nobody wants him to ruin his life personally and professionally.
Right. It would be the greatest, one of the greatest.
He's not available.
Right. And that's, I get it. It's, he is high maintenance and he is all of those things. But the fact that the Browns are still relying on him, and I know people will say, well, they're not really relying on him.
They went and got Jarvis Landry.
They're not relying on him. When he comes back, he is an automatic starting wide receiver and completely alters how you game plan for the rest of the season.
He probably pushes Jarvis Landry to the inside.
Right.
Like Jarvis Landry doesn't push Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon pushes Jarvis Landry.
Right. Until they sign another number one type receiver, they are, by definition, relying on him to be their number one receiver. And I get it. It's only August 10th, and they don't play for another month.
And then he's going to frustrate us because he's going to loaf it on a couple of routes, and then he's going to go crazy on a couple of routes. He's going to be wildly inconsistent. He's going to cause a couple of interceptions, but it's not going to matter because he's capable of going for 220 yards in a single game.
Right. And how long do we have to keep doing this? Other teams... If the Browns would have cut him 2 years ago, probably when they should have cut him, when he appeared to be a complete lost cause, nobody would have blamed them for cutting him. He probably doesn't get a second chance in the league at that point. If the Browns cut him, what was it, 2015, when he was supposed to come back and he didn't come back. Again, it's the Browns, so who knows? They would have found a solution, I would have hoped. They would have moved on. They would have adjusted accordingly. They have not adjusted accordingly.
In business.
They still rely on him.
In business and life and everything, an organization has a certain amount of bandwidth. Mm-hmm. They are wasting a certain amount of bandwidth on Josh Gordon. They would be able to use that somewhere else. I'm not talking about money. I'm not talking about anything else. I'm just saying, you think about him, sometimes it would be easier not to think about him at all. Right. And you'd make another plan and you would adjust and react. Like I say, Carson Wentz on the 2017 Browns. No, the 2017 Browns would have looked totally different.
Right.
They would have looked totally different.
Right.
And the Browns, without thinking about Josh Gordon, their entire wide receiver path would be totally different. Maybe they still sign Kenny Britt. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they keep Terrell Pryor. I don't know.
Right.
It's all different. But they keep tying up that bandwidth. They keep leaving it hanging out there. And as a result, they end up being kind of victimized by his availability or not.
Well, and the other thing I can't get behind is, well, if he's going to come back, it's going to be with us or no one else. Yes. You know what? You can't live that way.
No.
A year ago, you cut Josh Hayden or Joe Hayden, and he is now a starting cornerback on your alleged biggest rival.
Yes.
So apparently they weren't thinking that way when it came to Joe Hayden, who was a more useful football player more recently than Josh Gordon was. It's not 2013 anymore, by the way. 2013 was 5 years ago. Whatever he's lost from 2013 to now, when he's now 27 years old, that's not necessarily insignificant.
No. It's not. But I usually get into this argument with Indians fans who, well, they're paying them starter money, they got to play them.
Right.
No.
That's not how it
the
works.
deal's guaranteed. You're pot committed. You might as well bring up the AAA guy and see if he can contribute better than Trot Nixon in right field,
Yeah.
making I don't care if he's making $6.3 million. You can't force him to earn that money by making him play poorly.
Right. It doesn't change the contract.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
And you're right. That's such a stupid thing that happens in sports all the time.
And the time that you've put into Josh Gordon is a sunk cost. Mm-hmm. And you need to consider that. You can't get it back.
Right. And I'm not advocating cutting him.
Me neither.
If they did, I would understand it wholeheartedly.
Yes. I would understand it more than I do the trade of Corey Coleman, at least until we see Hard Knocks this week.
But as we project this thing forward, that again, it's only August, but let's say he's not here by the opener. Mm-hmm. Then what? Then how long do we keep doing this?
Yeah, I think if he doesn't make it to the opener, then I think John Dorsey finally makes his decision. And honestly, if they bring in Des Bryant, does that change their decision on Josh Gordon too?
I think those two are closer in talent at this point, or productivity, than Browns fans probably want to admit. Yep. Josh has the higher upside, but Des is there. Des is available. And
who saw that coming?
Yeah.
I mean, Des was the guy who needed the full-time babysitter?
Yeah. Yeah. He had some issues.
But he's been available for the better part of the last, however many years he's been in the league.
He plays. He plays.
He plays nicked up too.
Mm-hmm. Browns fans would love him. He could completely flame out and go down in a Twitter rampage, but
sure. And playing next to Jarvis Landry would be good for Des Bryant.
Yeah,
I'm all in favor of Des Bryant.
I want Des Bryant too. I'm especially at wide receiver. I don't think this team is in any position to say no to talent.
Yeah, let me push Rashard Higgins down the chart a little bit, and that's not to trash him. I like what I've seen, but
yeah.
I'd much rather count on Rashard Higgins behind Landry and Des Bryant, or Landry, Des Bryant, and Josh Gordon, or whatever.
Let's wrap up Browns here.
All right.
So, preseason optimism notwithstanding, I should say preseason game opener, or preseason game optimism notwithstanding, where is your level of optimism just for the season as a whole? Everybody gets excited this time of year. But in terms of expectations, in terms of really being excited for the season, where are you at?
I'm really excited, but really excited with reasonable expectations. I think this team is capable, on the high side, of winning 50% of their games. I'm taking over 5.5 for whatever the over is. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't bet that they're going to win 8 games.
No,
unless got really, really good odds. But
yeah.
I think this team will compete every single week, and if they can stay healthy, they can win games down the stretch against unhealthy teams as the landscape changes. I think they've got enough depth to survive an NFL season, and that's the first time I've been able to say that in a long time. Jarvis Landry I said this on Twitter, is the first time I've felt this way about a playmaker since Kellen Winslow on the Browns, probably. He is a gamer. He actually makes plays.
Yeah.
He's not going to let you down the majority of the time. He's actually going to make everybody around him better. Mm-hmm. And is it Kellen Winslow? Is that the last time we can say the Browns had a play? Maybe Peyton Hillis for a minute?
People would say Josh in that one season in 2013, Josh Gordon, but that was such that's fair. It was like one of the best wide receiver seasons in NFL history, but it was also a completely lost season.
Yeah.
In the sense that team wasn't ever competing for anything. I think they were 3-3 after they won that Buffalo game, but they wound up 4-12. Yeah, they lost their last 10. That was the Chud season. So, yeah. You're right. It's been. There was the spike with Peyton Hillis, and there was the spike with Josh Gordon. But Jarvis Landry's locked up for the long term. He's only 25 years old. He's reliable. He plays every game. I could see how his act, you saw a little bit of this last night, how his act would get old if this team doesn't start winning. And I think that's why a lot of Dolphins fans Dolphins fans are not huge Jarvis Landry fans, it seems. So maybe that's,
So did you freak out over those 2 personal fouls?
The Denzel Ward and the
Jarvis Landry.
Not really.
2 taunts?
Nah.
I didn't freak out
preseason.
either, but it was like,
Right.
really, guys?
Right. They're amped up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's a lot of my optimism.
Do you want to know my hot take?
Yeah.
The Browns are going to beat the Steelers in week 1.
And you only think if they beat the Steelers.
The Steelers start slow. They're going to take the Browns lightly.
Mm-hmm.
The Browns are going to be competent enough to finish a game against the team that doesn't sweat the first 4 games.
Yeah.
The Steelers ease their way into a season. Ben Roethlisberger is as old as can be for a starting quarterback now. The Browns are going to win week 1.
Well, if they win week 1.
They might lose the next 3, but they're going to win week 1.
So, I'm not going to play the schedule game, but they play the Saints.
The Jets.
And then the Jets on Thursday night. And then I think maybe like the Ravens. Their schedule was going to be tough no matter what because they're the Browns. Because every team looks at them as they're the win on the schedule. So their schedule is going to look tough no matter what. Sure. It's all about, I can't remember if in 2007 the schedule looked tough.
But guess what? I don't think the Ravens are good.
No.
I don't think the Ravens are good.
This is what it comes to.
I think the Browns are bad.
My optimism for this season comes down to what they did in the spring before the draft.
Yes.
And it comes down to that day where they traded for Jarvis Landry and Tyrod Taylor and Demarius Randall and all those guys. That's where my optimism for the season. And then another year of Myles Garrett, another year of David Njoku, all those guys getting better. That's where my optimism for the year comes from. I will say I don't know. You could talk me into this being, I think like 3 wins is the bottom. I think that's the floor.
I think that's reasonable.
But you could talk me into as many as 10. You could talk me anywhere from 3, 10 to 10. The one thing I'm not going to do, though, is I'm not going to count moral victories. To me, I am judging this team based on what their record is. You're an NFL team. No other team evaluates itself in terms of, well, they played hard and they played good. Last year's team almost won.
I gave the Browns one
games.
moral victory last year, the opening week against the Steelers.
See that?
But then they had to follow it up, and they didn't.
I agree. And that was part. I remember that was like when I was completely out on Sashi, because that moral victory against the Steelers showed me how low they had lowered the bar for this franchise. And that, oh my God, we almost beat the Steelers. Look how much better we are. That doesn't do it for me. You're an NFL team. Go out and win some games.
I agree.
So if they go 4-12, I'm going to be disappointed. I really am. I'm going to be really frustrated. So we'll see. But I'm as optimistic as anybody right now. And I was out on this team in 2015. I was out in 2016. I was out in 2017. I had little to no optimism going into any of those seasons other than typical football's back.
Right.
This year's different.
Even my optimism now, I'm optimistic the Browns could be a mediocre team and go 500.
Yeah.
Like, that's still not good, guys.
Right. Well, that's 4-12. Fans will joke about like throwing another parade. People get fired in other cities for 4-12.
Yeah.
Apropos of nothing. So.
No, it's true.
I guess we'll leave it there, but optimistic for now. Optimistic on the Browns. Real quick, Indians. I wish I was more invested in the Indians, but it's so much like the Cavs.
Oh yeah, it's a LeBron.
Let's get to the postseason and let's see what happens there. This was around the time last year where they hit a 22-game winning streak, and we saw that in the long run, other than a nice little 3-week run, it really was meaningless. It's absurd, though, that this team has 2 MVP candidates and 2 Cy Young candidates.
It's absolutely nuts.
The 90s Indians were incredible. They were those lineups, you look at them and you just shake your head because, like, Manny Ramirez is batting like 6th, and it's patently absurd.
Yeah.
Those teams never had the starting pitching that these teams have. And to have Corey Kluber and Trevor Bauer as legitimate, Corey Kluber's probably the Cy Young front runner right now, and Trevor Bauer's not far behind. And then to have Jose Ramirez in the thick of the MVP race with Mookie Betts and Mike Trout. And then if there's a 4th guy in there, it's Francisco Lindor. It's absurd. It's
absolutely insane. I love it. But I got to say, I have not, in many ways, like the Cavaliers, I've not particularly enjoyed watching the Indians this season.
Yeah.
I think I should have enjoyed it more.
Mm-hmm.
But I've kind of programmed myself to just waiting for the playoffs.
Well, it's kind of what it's. I mean, baseball is such a different sport to experience, but it is one of those things where when they win, it's what they were supposed to do,
Yes.
and when they lose, it's you're mad as all hell because why did they lose that game?
Expectations are tough.
It's a rough life. You wanted to hit on Ohio State real quick.
Yeah, so mostly just to say that I feel like I've matured as a sports fan and kind of on the side of sports media where I don't feel like I need to have much of an opinion on this at all.
Right.
And that's my opinion. And I wish more people would partake in that because we're in a spot with this story that it's not worth it to be right, to be wrong, to be anything but an observer and just kind of wait.
Yeah, I came out with some opinions when this was all first coming down, just in terms of, following it from further than I usually have followed Ohio State stuff back when I was a full-time Ohio State beat writer. Urban Meyer's performance at Big Ten Media Day was just completely bizarre in real time. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes out that he was lying and that he did know about this 2015 stuff, I thought that was stuff that, regardless of what this investigation finds, was worth criticizing, because regardless of how real the accusations are or any of that, I hate getting it. It's such a messy gray area. Mm-hmm. But to lie about domestic violence, or alleged domestic violence, which is what Urban Meyer did in 2018, is completely tone deaf. And I thought that was worth pointing out. And I know Ohio State fans think I want Urban Meyer fired and all that. I'm at the point where Ohio State's investigating it. Whatever they find, they'll find. And whatever they decide to do with that information, they'll do with that information. This is not something where I'm going to let Ohio State fans put me on old takes exposed or anything. This isn't a competition. It's a very messy situation. It's gotten to a really, really weird point where now, I mean, the two major reports now that have come out on this are on Facebook. It's crazy. It's really a messy, strange story.
And I was reminded very much by the first report that came out on Facebook was basically a firsthand account from
Courtney Smith, Zach Smith's ex-wife.
Yeah, ex-wife. And then the second one is basically it's very well put together. It's polished, but it's basically a summation of the emails that we've all been getting and the texts that we've all been getting kind of off the record that none of us could corroborate enough to put anywhere of substance. And I'm reminded of the Delonte West situation in Cleveland. We all got those emails about Delonte West and all the lurid details that were suggested about Delonte West and LeBron and all that stuff. Nobody put it anywhere until it ended up on a blog, Terez Owens. And then that became the clearinghouse, which justified everybody else talking about it.
Right.
And I don't know this writer who put the second story on Facebook, but it feels a little bit weird to me that all these people who didn't publish it to their news sites and blogs and other places, now that it got published on Facebook, all right, fair game, let's talk about it.
Let's aggregate it.
What kind of, if it wasn't journalistically justified, what are you allowing your journalistic clearinghouse to be? That's the question. I don't have an answer, and I'm really trying hard not to judge. I'm just very happy that I can sit on the sidelines and not think about it too much. Even the people who quote unquote win are going to lose. They're going to pay a price. It reminds me of Better Call Saul.
Right.
It's a TV show where Saul and his brother are battling, and they end up in court. Mm-hmm. In order to win the case, Saul has to bury his brother and prove that he's mentally ill.
Right.
Even by winning, he destroyed his family. So even the people who quote unquote win in this scenario there's a loser who's going to pay a price. The winners are going to pay a price. The loser's going to pay a price. Nobody's actually going to win.
I'll tell you what, though, you saw it with the rally, which was completely tone deaf and completely ridiculous. There are college football fans, especially at big programs like Ohio State. It's not specific to Ohio State fans because we saw it, with Penn State. We've seen it with other schools as well, who live for an us against the world, us against the media, us against everybody else mentality. And I joked after, you remember the Ohio State-Michigan game in 2016 where Ohio State won basically it was a controversial call and it went Ohio State's way, the fourth down call with JT Barrett. And I think I don't know if I joked about this publicly or not, that there were some Ohio State fans who were upset that they didn't get to spend all offseason complaining about the refs, like Michigan fans did.
That's so true.
that they were truly jealous of Michigan fans.
What's funny is I saw somebody posted the sky camera shot of that play.
Oh yeah,
just the other day. It lives on.
Oh, it completely does. The spot. But yeah, this isn't, you're right. This is not something you need to have a take on. This is not something you need to have an opinion on. This is something where, Ari Wasserman, my friend who covers Ohio State at the Athletic, this isn't about Brett McMurphy anymore. This isn't about Jeff Snooker. This is about what Ohio State finds in its investigation. That is the next step. Not any Facebook report, not any Reddit thread, not anything else. What Ohio State finds in its investigation is all that matters.
Yep, and I will personally be comfortable waiting to see whether Urban Meyer keeps his job or not.
Yep.
I'm trying not to have a rooting interest. I mean, obviously, it's hard to have a rooting interest when you decide, like I have, that no matter who wins or loses, everybody is going to lose something and pay a price.
Without a doubt. After a very optimistic podcast, we will end it on that. That is going to do it for today's 3 Sports Podcast for Craig Lyndall. I'm Ben Axelrod. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe on iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review, tell a friend. We'll be back with you soon talking about the Cleveland Browns and everything in the Cleveland sports world.